Hey, how's it going? This message is for Jupiter Return and for Brianna Rodden 7. And I really just want to say thank you for the money that you sent me on Cash App. I really appreciate it. Little do you know it's going to go to something really, really good. It's actually going to do much more than you thought that it was because initially you gave it out of your heart to me in order to help further what it is that I'm doing here on these pages. And when all is said and done, I mean, I really, really, really appreciate it because what it's done is put a burden on my heart to continue to create more content and to continue to create better content. And when I see your guys' names pop up on my feed on maybe one of the videos with a suggestion, possibly for a topic that you want me to tackle or something, I'm going to really lending an ear. But nevertheless, I mean, it's gonna. What you've done has inspired me with a bigger impetus to continue pushing, to continue doing what it is that I do here. Because when all is said and done, truthfully, I'm not gonna stop either way because this is basically like my only out to speaking to individuals in the community. I'm a INTJA, and when all is said and done, I'm an introverted person. I choose to stay inside, read books, learn things as opposed rather to hanging out with a bunch of people and doing a bunch of different things. I mean, that's usually the hardest part for me to get under with my personality type and just with the way I am. I'm not bemoaning it. I'm really actually I've integrated it well. But the fact that the community has reached out in YouTube here now at this time in a very positive way uplifts me. It emboldens me to continue to do better for all of you. I appreciate your contribution. And when all is said and done, the last name that I mentioned, I was unable to get the funds because I really honestly didn't think that anyone was going to send anything in, with bills being high, inflation in a lot of places, and I understand that. And once again, I'm going to continue to do what I do, but now with an increased fervor because of the fact that you guys have shown me what it's worth to you. I really appreciate that. Thank you, and on to this next video. So, welcome back, everyone. Today, what we're going to talk about is the Sigma male archetype and some things that I think could be added to the whole situation in order to make the Sigma male archetype a little bit more full. And when all is said and done, I mean, it's going to align the Sigma male archetype with all of its positive attributes and align it with the path of individuation. So I personally have identified with this archetype, or pop culture type, if you will, and there are three of them kind of that they have. They have beta male, alpha male, and sigma male. Those are like the three main going ones. I personally think, I'm kind of to preface this lecture, that every man, for the most part, there are some that are born with full-grown mustaches and hair on their chest, right? But at the end of the day, every man, I think, as a child, is a mama's boy, a Peter Pan, basically. They're a beta male. Everybody starts there. We kind of get pushed into, I mean, nowadays in this era, okay, generation X, generation Z, whatever, you know what I mean? Maybe not generation X, ZY, we could say. They kind of don't get put into the alpha male. There's not really a push to become an alpha male with these younger individuals in this day and age because of our social climate, right? But during my time growing up, that there was a push, there was an impetus, there was a responsibility to be that type of individual. So I believe that, I mean, in just a lot of the things that I went through, I ended up becoming that alpha male type subject. And as I got a little bit older, a little bit more mature, I went into a Sigma male type personality, right? And while these aren't real scientific typologies, they do link to real scientific typologies. They really do link to archetypes that explain them, that are real ancient, and will have some depth to add to an understanding of what they are. So I'm going to read this very long-winded piece. Hopefully you can stick the whole way with me through it. I'm going to throw up facts and different slides and stuff like that that can help to elucidate this subject a little bit more. But nevertheless, let's get into it. All right, so to start this off, right, I'm going to read the foreword to Sigma Male Archetype and the Path to Individuation. As a foreword, I'd like to state first and foremost that this video is not an attack against the Sigma Male idea or the people following it and embodying it. I would much rather like to shed light on some of the shortcomings I've seen and undergone with my very own application to and relationship towards this personality type. Furthermore, my goal here is to reinforce it and help to further those that claim to be a part of it by offering a sure antidote to the suffering, the silent rage, and possible confusion that brought them into the fascination, participation with, and identification with said personality type, Sigma Male, which obviously is archetypal. Sigma Male just being an exploration of the larger archetypes, for example, the lone wolf or outsider, the magician slash trickster, the hermit, and the rebel, etc. There may be more, but these are the most prominent, okay? While having found its place in our society in its current form, it is largely incomplete and can be very damaging to the adherent for certain reasons I will explain. And I will provide directions towards a high possibility of healing the gap that exists within it, that can amply be confirmed by the continual harrowing feedback that one continuously gets by actively and actually living this typology out. Finally, to end this introduction, I would like very much also to state that although the views and opinions of many of the pages that speak about the Sigma Male type and the plight that we face in relational dynamics is true due to the various misaligned configurations at work within our current social stratosphere, we must also see that they are one-sided, and one side can tend to ring with great truth to those that are suffering therein. The verity of their statements is due largely to the fact that male and female gender roles have been under extreme attack by the mainstream media and various private groups with their own agendas. And due to the mainstream media's heavy bombarding of propaganda and the mass person's proclivity towards believing and following the mass media's narrative, sadly, the lover in many of us has succumbed. Let us not forget the hooks that most are hung on by these attacks. Our own bouts and failures in love and life, how we have been met with betrayal, sadness, and their effect, which is a hellish and persisting pain. But there is hope, I believe, due to the fact that we are all still hardwired both genetically and physically to want human warmth, camaraderie, and the comforts of another's embrace. C.G. Jung, writing as Basilides, wrote in Septem Sermones ad Mortuos, Seven Sermons to the Dead is the name of the book, right? And the name of the writing. No communion is suffering and sickness. Communion in everything is dismemberment and disillusion. You're talking about solutio there, okay? And I'm going to throw the solutio chart up there. That way you can kind of follow along with what is being said here. Distinctiveness leadeth to singleness. And this distinctiveness is, in a way, we can look at sublimatio. I'll throw that up there as well too. Singleness is opposed to communion. But because of man's weakness over against the gods and daemons and their invincible law, is communion needful. Singleness is what the Sigma Male is practicing, point blank, okay? So Because of man's weakness over against the gods and daemons and their invincible law, is communion needful, not for man's sake, but because of the gods. The gods force you to communion, and as much as they force you, so much is the communion needed. More is evil. In communion, let every man submit to others, that communion be maintained, for you need it. Now, the gods force you to communion. For those of us that practice singleness, which I am one, I'm an INTJA, okay? So when all is said and done, I would rather just be alone, but I've caught myself raging and being filled with an archetypal energy and a desire to just get out and be amongst people. And it's caused me to do a few things, to say the least, okay? But nevertheless, the idea of the gods is the archetype rising up in the psyche and giving you the unction that you cannot desire and that you cannot resist to go out and seek communion with others, okay? So, in communion, I'm going to go back. In communion, let every man submit to others, that communion be maintained, for ye need it. In singleness, the one man shall be superior to the others, that every man may come to himself and avoid slavery. I think in a large way that means that, like, you know, when you're being a loner, in a way, you might be doing it because you feel that other people are looking down on you, but maybe it's a bit of grandiosity that's causing you to be that way. That's causing me to be that way. That maybe in some ways I think I'm better than everyone else or most people, and that's why I don't want to be around them. You know, I'm nitpicking their flaws. I'm nitpicking flaws, both imaginary and flaws that are actually realistic. Okay, so excuse me. In communion, there shall be continence, meaning that there's going to be chasteness. Okay. And the thing is this is kind of ambiguous because when you're out there kicking it with a gang of different people, I mean, it's smart to exercise the austerities of a monk. You know, otherwise maybe you end up with a VD or something. Okay, like we're all adults here, so I'm gonna talk. Okay, I'm gonna speak. But there's a yin yang type ideology here because communion is being out open. I mean, or the orgiastic rites of Dionysus was communion indeed, par excellence. Okay, but the fact that it's going to lead to singleness again, communion, togetherness, being one with the group is going to lead back to it. The root cause of being alone is concealed in that. Okay, is what I believe that this is saying. In singleness, there shall be prodigality. So we have the opposite now again. Prodigality meaning, you know, wantonness, wasteful living. Think of the prodigal son story in Scripture, okay? Communion is depth, meaning getting down, getting your hands dirty, you know, getting on all fours, doing what you do. And when all is said and done, the fact that communion is depth, we have a Dionysian element, and I'm going to throw up something about the Dionysian / Apollonian aspects, okay? Singleness is height. Communion being depth is also, we have to think about coagulatio, okay? And solutio goes into that because water is an element attributed to the moon. So I'll throw both of those up there for communion is depth. Singleness is height. Okay, and height is something, let's think about Saturn. Let's think about the highest peak. Let's think about where the sage goes to receive his wisdom and then comes down to the populace with new ideas, with a new personality, with a new way of being that wows and attracts everyone to him, if he did it right, okay? And singleness being height, we have to think about sublimatio, okay? The alchemical step of sublimatio, and I'm going to throw that up there as well for a second too, okay? Right measure in communion purifieth and preserveth. Understand, right measure, meaning enough of it. Too much of it, you'll go crazy. Or at least I will, okay? Right measure in communion purifieth and preserveth. Right measure in singleness purifieth and increaseth. Too much of that will make you go absolutely nuts. Communion giveth us warmth. Singleness, singleness giveth us light. And light is a very cold or very subtle fire. It has been said by certain esotericists. Okay, so it's like a cold flame. It's a flame you can get out in front of and not be burned. Maybe you'll get sunburn, a suntan a little bit. Okay, communion giveth us warmth refers to the flame of desire, because there's a lot of transference that's going on within groups and from person to person that ends up a lot of times sparking a conjunctio urge in a very concrete way. Okay, and I'll throw up something on the conjunctio urge and ideas of what the conjunctio is. Okay, obviously though, concealed within certain elucidating veils within Jung's statements, there is a balance that must be struck in order to achieve real wholeness, which I personally believe that the Sigma male archetype is a great starting point towards, due to the inherent strengths that the adherent of that type is said to possess. I will refer to the Sigma male type as an archetype, but it is in truth not an actual scientific psychological type, but rather a pop culture personality. But you got people following it and being it and finding themselves in it nevertheless. Okay, and this pop culture personality stands as a counterpart to the others, which are alpha male and beta male personality types, archetypes, pop culture personalities as well. Okay. Okay, so now that we got over that, we're going to go to my pre-ramble to the Sigma male to individuation candidate constitution. Okay? At one time, I really resonated with the Sigma male archetype, and it had served as a framework for my self-understanding and fortification of my sense of self after a difficult breakup that I endured. And this is when it really came on the scene, I'm pretty sure, or when it came to my knowledge that it existed, and I think they had so many followers at that time, so it's probably existed a long time. It just gave me a framework to put my ideologies into, okay, at that time. Okay, so it had served as a framework for my self-understanding and fortification of my sense of self after a difficult breakup I endured. I really started to identify with it before the breakup occurred, and even a bit before the mainstream bombardment of negativity came upon relationships, and a bit before masculine and feminine dynamics in society became as ultra commonplace as they are now. I could say that I exhibited this type's traits. Within the ranks of the comment section and of the various sites that host videos about this type, I witnessed many people, often in pain, although doing their best to mask it, searching for meaning. It was clear that they were adopting this archetype without fully grasping its potential pitfalls, of which, when I saw the pitfalls, I felt this counter insight creeping within me and found it to be profound once I searched it out. The Sigma male archetype offers a sense of strength and independence, which many times conceals victimhood and weakness that are being repressed in lieu of donning the Sigma male identity and lifestyle. And this is repression of shadow contents, which, if left consciously unexamined, risks creating a false refuge of rigidity that can bar the path towards deeper growth. What I've realized, and what many may not, is that this archetype is not the end of the journey, but rather a stepping stone towards something greater, individuation. So this archetype, as it is expressed, is highly usable towards something better, but it's very one-sided. Light casts an unmistakable shadow to eyes that can see. We must consciously embrace and integrate our shadow, in which realm reside our psychological complexes, which indeed are also the royal road into the narrow gate of the unconscious. We must understand the deeper dynamics behind the autonomy we seek within our fascination with and with our subscribing to this archetype and any archetypal energy for that matter, okay? We must claim our independence, but also we must equally cooperatively lay the foundation for true psychological and spiritual wholeness. Your personal willingness to reflect on this and to see into your own prima materia, which is the starting point that leads to the fascination with this archetype, may cause you to focus on the frustrations and pain which you have endured in relationships and also the various hang-ups with the various, too many to get into particularly, presented by those due to the overbearing social norms of society, which is most assuredly the point of inception and the dissemination and most important acceptance of such an archetypal viewpoint. Let's remember that the human under direct influence of an expression of an archetype is rigid and one-sided in his or her response to the possession by such also. I recognize how others are similarly struggling through social dynamics in this time, men and women, and I have personally embraced my own readiness to strive and evolve beyond it. I know this can be done once again, and although our society is extremely sick and getting more critical and conditioned by the day, we still have that same 2 million year old, probably older than that, plus hardwiring in our genetics. Much of this tells me that the charades surrounding the irreconcilability of modern men and women in relationship to one another, which many of us are strangely believing and subsequently are now automatically reproducing via pain memories and fear-based responses being punitively levied against one another. They are a byproduct, once again, of a very divisive social programming which is only being furthered by the mass media and the consumers of such who are acting out the poison because they have a real innate reason to believe it. That reason being trauma history and overt fear. Just keep in mind that this turmoil we are dealing with can be affected greatly by sole individuals who are doing their inner work. However, at large, it is a situation that they are blindly hurled into initially and go along with and agree with most unconsciously due to the social leaders, for example, the government and individuals in high places with money and political agendas, impacting the sway of the mass man by feeding him morals through the media and through public figures that push these ideas down the ladder. Ideas that plainly go against the laws of instinct and nature. We learn about morals as we do when we are following a good conscience. However, conscious and conscience, okay, both of those things, when we're following both of those things out, quote unquote, we're going to reproduce this. However, let us just take a look quickly at the definition of this word. And if you know anything about the superego of Freudian psychology in how it enforces morals and values punitively in the psyche and also keeps people moving together as one when each is doing and acting out what is right and gives them grounds to ostracize those who do not do what is good and those who are not valued by the group at large. Who does the latter group receive its mandates from? Most of the adherents cannot trace or name the creator of the ideology they live out, and for what real reasons and to what ultimate end. Answering these latter questions, one usually finds out that the end prospect is in favor of the few, and it's for monetary profit, and that the subsequent division leads to the originators of such ideas and investors in such mandates gaining power as well. So they're profiting off of the turmoil that's going on, that's just newly popping up. Like, where the heck did this come from? Well, we don't know, but here it is, and we got to deal with it, and it's causing us a whole lot of division And it's just something we got to deal with. And then you got all these people popping up making money off it on the side. Keep your eyes open and you'll see what I'm talking about, okay? Before we read the chosen excerpts from C.G. Jung, which sheds light on the former statements, let us quickly look at the etymology of the word moral, as it is key to this unfettering of the mind, leading it into the power of true individuality and sovereignty of choice. Principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong, or good and bad behavior is one of the descriptions of this, okay? The matter boiled down to a simple morality. Here's for instance, sentence, okay? The matter boiled down to simple morality. Innocent prisoners ought to be freed. So this is for example for you, okay? Here's another definition: a particular system of values and principles of conduct, especially one held by a specified person or society. Plural noun is moralities. And for example of that is a bourgeois or bourgeois morality. Okay, it's also the extent to which an action is right or wrong. So behind all, this is another for example, behind all the arguments lies the issue of the morality of the possession of nuclear weapons. But let us look at the root of this word, the Proto-Indo-European root actually, and I'll put this up on the screen. Me1, it expresses certain qualities of mind. Oldest form, meh1, and the suffix O grade form is mo, to, mood, mod1, from Old English mod, mind, which means mind or disposition, okay? Gemütlich, Gemütlichkeit, from Old High German Muat, mind, spirit. Both A and B from Germanic Motaz, and that's real old Germanic right there. When you see the as is at the end, that's old school. Perhaps suffix O grade form mos or MOS. Okay, morale, we get the word moral, morale, mores, moros, from Latin mos, wont, humor, manner, custom, okay? So the Hebrew word and the Hebrew roots, the term muser, okay, muser, which is 306 in hold on. Yes, 306 in Gematria. If any of you guys want to look that up, I might throw something up there just so you can check out what 306 would yield. A lot of similitudes there. Or 316, musari. Okay? Musar or musari derived from a word meaning discipline or correction. Now for me, prison comes up to mind, okay? Discipline, correction, Department of Corrections, okay? Right? Is often translated as ethics, morality, moral instruction, or moral discipline, okay? So the Hebrew root for these words are musar, which means to deliver, assign, transmit, transfer, inform against, like being a snitch, notify, hand over, betray, give, devote, sacrifice oneself, sa. And then masa, to melt, thaw, dissolve, liquefy. We have solutio there, okay? I'll throw that back up there again because morals link you to a group, okay? Also, rot, decompose, decay. That's mortificatio. To make run or faint. And also to acquire good manners, okay? And I wrote here, these words contain undertones pointing to the system. The patriarchy, which always gets a bad rap, especially in contemporary times. These words point to the learning process as pertains to indoctrination into the ways of a group, ideology, or society. and also the repercussions and corrections that the group will no doubt carry out upon one if they do not conform, if they choose to go against the grain. To melt, dissolve, or liquefy has to do with solutio, which is all about the group. And the group is the container in which a person is dissolved pleasantly or painfully, and thus made one with the collective and the others. It is where one receives a sense of self from. Really, the self and self knowledge is being reflected back into that person in the group via the filter of the group. But this is most definitely a flawed version of that, an extremely truncated version of that unadulterated self we should be striving after with sincerity. When we are in the groups, we give the overseers of such the responsibility to hold the weight of our own beings and our own ignorance of the self for us, and also the responsibility to mete it out in their tailored way via ideals, traditions, and trends. They're doing this for us. Rot and decay, for example, speak of the alchemical mortificatio, and this alchemical step is the first stage of transformation. But isn't it telling that one has to die to the group or for the group in order to find themselves? Even Jesus Christ suggested this to his followers. And I'm going to put a scripture up there so you can see this, okay? In extreme group memberships, one actually dies. Some, many, okay? Sometimes many. And others are impacted oftentimes to leave because they've seen enough. Yet some fools pass on still and are totally destroyed. To make run or fate is plain to see. A group will make you prove yourself to them in many painful, torturous, and tiring ways for membership and acceptance. This is standard and exists in every group to certain degrees of laxity and intensity. To acquire good manners is the ultimate goal of indoctrination. They tell us, but we never ask, what is good to you? What is actually good to you? What is this good you're talking about? Okay? And they don't ask this to the ones teaching them, and sometimes they don't even know being good followers. Most of us just allow them to hand feed us for the most part, and usually don't question the values until it's too late. This is a definite shepherd and sheep dynamic at play. We see this in a lot of groups, churches, we see them in gangs, we see it in some gyms I've been to as well, though, too, that are really big on gym politics. Usually when you hear the word politics, there's a lot of this going on, and hazing and different things of that nature, and proving your loyalty and membership, etc., etc., okay? So now on to Jung's text for this, okay? In Collected Work 7, which is 2 essays on analytic psychology, paragraph 240, he states, "It is a notorious fact that the morality of a society as a whole is in inverse ratio to its size. For the greater the aggregation of individuals, the more the individual factors are blotted out, and with them morality, which rests entirely on the moral sense of the individual and the freedom necessary for this. Hence, every man is, in a certain sense, unconsciously a worse man when he is in society than when acting alone." And hearken back to what he wrote under the nom de plume Basilides, okay? Well, under that pen name Basilides, please. And I spoke about that earlier in the lecture. For he is carried by society and to that extent relieved of his individual responsibility. Any large company composed of wholly admirable persons has the morality and intelligence of an unwieldy, stupid, and violent animal. This is Jung saying this, and I agree with him totally. The bigger the organization, the more unavoidable it is its immorality and blind stupidity. And again he says, in a small social body, the individuality of its members is better safeguarded, and the greater is their relative freedom and the possibility of conscious responsibility. The man of today, who resembles more or less the collective ideal, has made his heart into a den of murderers, as can easily be proved by the analysis of his unconscious, even though he himself is not in the least disturbed by it. Insofar as he is normally adapted to his environment, it is true that the greatest infamy on the part of his group will not disturb him, so long as the majority of his fellows steadfastly believe in the exalted morality of their social organization. Think about how many people that you see on social media continue to repeat the same rhetoric that is really caustic and is really sometimes physically destructive towards individuals, you know? And I'm talking about like really destructive. I'm not talking about, and mind you, I was born in 1983. So like somebody can say something quote unquote negative towards me, and I'll brush it off unless you're gonna actually physically do something to me. It doesn't matter. I could care less what somebody says for the most part. Okay, but there are some things that are going on in society to where people are being dismantled, really physically dismantled, loss of life type of things, and the average person in the group sees nothing wrong with it. Sees nothing wrong with it. Why? Because the mass sway of the large group holds power over their consciousness and over their conscience. Okay? So I hope that by sharing this information that I have learned from and gained within my conscious journey through examination of this archetype, by sharing these key insights, you'll not only deepen your own path, but also help others who are willing to navigate theirs. And that's if you really learn something from this. And that's always my hope. That's why I take the time to edit these things and put them out here for you guys, because I really believe that somebody's going to get touched and understand something here. Okay? And be able to reproduce their knowledge, how they've seen it and how they've heard it, and touch somebody else. You know, a spark can start a flame can start a wildfire, okay? Thank you for trusting me to be a non judgmental part of this exploration with all of you, my viewers, because it is through conversations like these that the human path and experience of shared suffering becomes illuminated in such a way that it begins to reveal all of its possibilities, its depth, and its riches. So here's the direct introduction to the Sigma male archetype and the path to individuation, okay? In this video, we're going to make a deep dive into the psychology of the Sigma male archetype and its potential as a gateway to the path of individuation C.G. Jung spoke so much of. While the Sigma male is often idealized for his autonomy, self-reliance, and resistance to societal norms, this archetype also presents outstanding psychological challenges that, if left unchecked, can hinder deeper growth. The way in which the Sigma male overtly rejects the collective consciousness can lead to repression, which is synonymous with and to the strengthening of the shadow, and its subsequent licensing of free rein to autonomous psychological complexes. And I put here C.F. Emil Durkheim's theory of collective consciousness. You might want to look a little bit deeper into that, but for just the sake of a quick understanding, I'm going to read something about it here, okay? French sociologist Emil Durkheim is credited with popularizing the concept of collective consciousness, which is a set of shared beliefs, values, attitudes, and knowledge that exists within a society or organization. And keep in mind, for those that prescribe or subscribe to Jungian psychology, okay, Jungian ideas, this pre-exists the shadow being created in an individual, okay? Durkheim believed that collective consciousness was a social phenomenon that explained how people are bound together into social groups and societies. While I don't agree with all of his sentiments, but use them in addition to what are, in my opinion, better, more subtly nuanced systems for our informational purposes. It helps to know that he theorized that collective consciousness is greater than individual consciousness because it exists above and beyond the individual, and that collective consciousness was the initial foundation for social solidarity, providing the common moral bond. Remember that word moral, moral bond between people and the common ways of defining the world. However, enough of this type of living in this type of form and thought, and then, okay, however, enough of this type of living in this type of form of thought, what ends up happening because of all the problems that you're gonna face, right? You would have all the impetus in this day and age that you would need quickly to become a Sigma male. Quickly, okay? Because a lot of the hardships, pain, and suffering come when people, I believe, are kind of in this alpha male stage, when they're out ripping and running and, getting into situations with females and, making life and death decisions, and maybe they get into it and find a girlfriend and they think that this is the right one, and she breaks his heart, and now he's caught within a split within himself. Okay, for example, and this could even be switched for a female. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm pretty sure there are a lot of Sigma females out there that are just want to be alone, don't want to deal with guys, and are putting down the opposite sex in the same manner. Okay. The person which identifies as a Sigma male can transcend these overarching limitations by integrating the shadow and even begin to engage with other archetypes, which can serve to balance the one-sidedness, which is how archetypes express themselves through us and our dealing with them. And by way of this balance, the Sigma male would be cultivating a rapport with the self via the ego-self axis. And they would then well be on the equally long and winding but fulfilling and empowering, spiraling, and ultimately cyclical road to individuation. In order to guide us, I will reference a few insights from Carl Gustav Jung, Edward F. Edinger, and James Hollis, whose professional work, as many know, have shed much light upon the inner working of the dynamics of the psyche and have assisted the aspirants, which are all of us that subscribe to his viewpoints, if you will, right? Have shed much light upon the inner working and dynamics of the psyche and have assisted the aspirant on the transcendental journey towards wholeness. So to unpack anything too high resolution in this idea, I'd like to talk about some pros and cons of the typology. And so we don't waste much time, I will also speak about the corrective, which you could take or leave it as you wish. The first point I'd like to touch upon is the Sigma male's resistance to the collective conscious and its quantifiable psychological costs. The Sigma male, with his focus on rejecting societal norms, embodies the beginning of a psychological journey. As Jung once said, the development of the individual can only begin with the recognition of one's opposition to the collective norms. So it's a first step. The first step is to say, forget about society, forget about all the norms, forget about all these different things. I'm abridging the superego. Okay, I'm abridging it. I'm taking out what is not usable to me, and I'm holding on maybe to some of the things that'll keep me alive, so I don't get, arrested and thrown into a cage for the rest of my life. Okay. So this resistance, the resistance to the collective conscious, right? However, often becomes repression, where parts of the psyche tied to social engagement, such as empathy, vulnerability, or relational needs, are pushed into the unconscious. You may hearken back to my earlier comments about the one-sidedness of archetypes, and also remember that what one shows is a prevalent part of their egoic constitution, and tellingly, in the constitution of their persona usually most sinisterly betrays the deficiencies that they are suffering, but only to eyes which see. You got to be able to read that type of stuff. Because what you see is not always what you get. These repressed needs, aforementioned, feed the shadow in the realm of complexes, in the personal conscious. Okay, which Jung describes that such a realm, due to life and the drama that occurs, is full of those things, the aforementioned complexes. Okay, Jung stated in short that the shadow is that which we do not wish to be, or that which we talk smack about all the time, or that which we would like to push away, for instance, or that which we're like, these people are terrible. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's almost as if by not wanting to be or do something or be bothered so much with some sector or aspect of life, we split off the other side of the thing by clinging to its opposite, and by doing so we assure that in some way we will succumb to that very same thing anyways. Paul spoke of it like this in Romans 7:10 through 18. And I refer to scripture because it is full of archetypal structure. Jordan Peterson has showed a lot of that to the layman in these times, okay? But we're going to look at E.F. Ettinger, what he has to say about it here in a second, okay? So scripture is full of archetypal structure, and archetypal structure that is still deeply impressed upon our psyches, our deep psyches as Westerners, whether we ascribe to it or not, or subscribe to it or not. E.F. Ettinger, in his book, The Mystery of the Conjunctio, attested to this fact, in which he says, alchemy is that great collective dream. And he's talking about alchemists, the alchemists and their projections that they were making on their lab experiments with their psyche, okay? That's where we get all those crazy drawings from, right? And what makes it, alchemy is the great collective dream, and what makes it so important for us is that it's the dream of our ancestors. The alchemists were rooted in the Western psyche, which we've inherited. So their imagery, their fantasy, their dream is our fantasy and our dream. And also, to the pious Jew, the Torah is bread. To the believing Christian, the Gospels are bread. To the devout Muslim, the Quran is bread. Why is that? It's because all these scriptures are treasuries of the archetypes, each in its own religious and cultural context. It's there whether we like it or not, so we might as well use it to our advantage.